year ago, my younger brother, Leo, left home. He had been reading trendy books about eco-villages and said he found a real place, a community living in harmony with nature. He sent enthusiastic letters from a village whose name immediately gave me chills, the Ash Hollow. Then the letters stopped. The connection was lost. The police searched, but all they found was an abandoned road and impassable peat bogs. Missing without a trace, they said. But I'm a former soldier, and I don't believe in missing without a trace. I believe you go and you look. I found the place. It was hell pretending to be purgatory. The Ash Hollow greeted me with a pale, acrid haze. Above the valley, trapped between peat swamps, hung a permanent smog from underground smouldering organic matter. It smelled of dampness, ash, and something else. Something ancient, something sour. The village was quiet, too quiet. I saw the first resident by a crooked well. He was slowly, with visible effort, pulling up a bucket. His skin was pale and wet, like a drowned man's, covered in dark moss-like patches. I stepped closer. "Hello," I said. "I'm looking for my brother Leo. He came here a year ago." The man slowly turned his head. His eyes were cloudy, empty. He opened his mouth. It was full of dark, almost black soil. A quiet gurgling sound escaped. I recoiled. I realized there was no one here to help me. I moved along the only street. Almost every house was occupied by these creatures, former humans, slowly reclaimed by the land. They wandered aimlessly, sat on debris, stared into nothing. They were living corpses, preserved by the cursed swamp. At the edge of the village, it blocked my path. I had heard of it from scattered rumors, but reality was worse. The watchdog, huge, almost the size of a cart, a wild boar with a human torso strapped to its back with thick leather bands and sinews. The torso's arms were unnaturally long, with black claws, the head dangling lifelessly. The creature let out a hoarse roar, half pig squeal, half human groan, and lunged at me. I was not a hero. The army taught me survival, not victory. I dodged its deadly attack. As it passed, I swung a barn axe at the rear leg of the boar, not the torso. A crack. The creature squealed in pain and fell on its side, clawing helplessly. I didn't finish it off. I walked past, avoiding its human eyes, full of pain. In the first house I entered, I found signs of Leo. His backpack, a few books, and a notebook, his diary. I read it as dim light filtered through the dirty window. They call him the Peat Father, an ancient god who saved them from hunger. He gave them eternal life but took everything else. They feel no pain, no joy. They just exist, like moss on stone. I tried to leave, but the fog, this ashen fog, it won't let go. I walked for 3 hours and returned to the same house. The keeper told me the swamp never releases those it loves. They prepare for the harvest. Once a generation, the god demands new blood, fresh life to renew himself. The keeper said I was lucky, that I would become the most honored offering. The last entry, in a trembling hand. Church. He will take me to the church. If anyone reads this, run. I knew I had little time. I'm not the type to talk much about myself. And honestly, there's not much to tell. I'm just an ordinary fisherman. I work as a carpenter. On weekends, I spend time at my cabin. But I want to share one story, a very strange one. For many years, I felt like I needed to tell someone, but I always held myself back, even when I drank too much. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy and laugh at me later, or even drag me to a mental hospital. But the internet is different. Here, you can tell anything and remain, as they say, in the shadows. Good thing my niece taught me how to use a computer. So about 20 years ago, actually, I won't sugarcoat it. I remember every detail of this story. On March 20th, 1998, my good friend Serge and I went fishing. The plan was simple: drive into the woods, leave the car where the road ends, and walk to our favorite lake. Oh, the fish there was delicious. Almost jumped right into our hands. We always prepared well. A tent just in case, plenty of food, water, homemade moonshine. Serge made it himself. Warm clothes, matches. That day, the weather was perfect. Sun shining, blue sky, birds singing. We parked the car, grabbed all our stuff, and headed through the forest to the lake. We arrived in about an hour, set up, cast our rods, sat talking, fishing, enjoying life. We were there until around 3 p.m. But then the weather suddenly changed. It got really cold. Serge suggested packing up and heading back to the car. We started walking, but the weather kept getting worse. And this wasn't even the strangest part. Serge and I knew this route like the back of our hands. We'd been here 100 times, maybe more, but suddenly, nothing looked familiar, and we couldn't turn back. If one of us made a mistake, the other would have corrected it immediately. We exchanged glances, and then Serge couldn't take it. "Mikhail, something's wrong. We're going the right way, but everything around is different. Where are the stumps? Where's that crooked pine? I don't understand. Let's head back to the lake. We didn't get far, and maybe we can try the right path from there." We walked back. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Still no lake. Serge was swearing like a sailor, trying to hide his fear. I couldn't believe we were lost. And to make matters worse, snow started falling. Even though the weather forecast promised sunny weather and above freezing temperatures for the next 3 days. We walked and walked, and then came upon a clearing we had never seen before. In the center, there were 3 wooden crosses. We went closer. The crosses were ancient. The wood almost rotted away. No dates, no names. While examining them, the snowstorm intensified. Visibility was poor. It was freezing. Serge and I, tough, experienced fishermen, started to panic. We wandered for another hour, still no car, no sign of familiar terrain. Snow kept falling, and it was getting dark. Suddenly, Serge stopped and shouted, "Look, there's a house." I looked, and indeed, there was a small house. We ran toward it, freezing cold. We reached the house. It was small, intact, no damage. We were very relieved, but there was a padlock on the door. Serge found a large stone and broke it open in about 15 minutes. We stepped inside, finally able to breathe. We started inspecting the house. There were 2 rooms, a large main room and a small entryway where firewood was stored. The house was entirely wooden. It looked like it was built 30 to 40 years ago. The doors were solid, strong. Both the front door and the one connecting the entryway to the main room had sturdy internal bolts. Serge immediately noticed it was odd and said, "Why put a bolt on the inner door if the front door already has one? And this house is in the middle of the wilderness." The main room was simple but neat and functional. 1 small window, 2 beds, a little table by the window, and a stove. We were freezing cold. We never expected to get lost, and certainly not for a snowstorm to hit. I quickly got the stove going. Serge prepared some food, opened a can of fish, made sandwiches, poured some of our moonshine. I collected snow outside in a kettle to boil water for tea. We drank hot tea, warmed up a bit, and began our small meal. While eating, we discussed how to get out. We agreed to stay in the cabin overnight. If it snowed again tomorrow, we'd stay another day. We had enough food, and we caught plenty of fish. By about 8 p.m, the snow stopped, and a sharp frost set in. I think it was around 10 minutes or more past 8. We put on all our clothes, laid out our sleeping bags on the wooden beds, and started talking about this and that. But Serge returned to the main topic. This is strange. Have you ever seen weather like this here in late March? Sure, snow fell, but such cold. Well, anything can happen. Weather is unpredictable. Good thing we found this cabin. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened to us. You're right about that, but still, I can't figure it out. How could we get lost? After that question, a tense silence filled the room. We didn't know what to say. The room slowly warmed up, the stove crackled comfortably, and we gradually fell asleep. I don't know how long I slept, but at some point in the night, I suddenly woke up to a sound. I quickly gathered myself and listened. Someone was moving around outside. I looked out the window, but couldn't see anyone. Assuming it was wild animals, I lay back down. As I was drifting off again, a sharp knock came at the front door. I woke Serge quietly and whispered what had happened. Maybe it's an animal. Have you ever heard an animal knock on a door like a human? I tried to convey the strangeness of the situation to Serge. The knocking repeated 3 more times, each louder than the last. Serge grabbed the axe that was near the firewood in the entryway and approached the door, shouting, "Who's there?" No answer. Instead, a loud knock sounded again. "Hey, there are 5 of us here on a hunting trip. What do you want?" Serge was noticeably panicking. Soon after, he ran back into the entryway, bolted the second door, and sat across from me. Almost immediately, we noticed a shadow in the window, moving so fast we couldn't make out what it was. "Who do you think it could be?" Serge asked. "I don't know. Frost, snow. Who would wander in the forest at night in this weather? Maybe some mute hunter. Then he could knock on the window. Strange." We sat, scared, unsure how to react. Soon, we heard a female voice. Soft, pleasant, very young. A girl was standing outside the front door. She said, "Please let me in, I'm freezing. I came fishing and got lost." Serge jumped up, tried to open the door, almost did, but I stopped him just in time. I told the girl, "Sweetheart, stay by the window on that side. We'll look at you and let you in." There was a pause. She said, "Okay." But her voice had changed. It sounded rougher, huskier. We went to the window. It was dark outside, and then we nearly fell over. A girl approached the window, young and beautiful, like a wildflower. We were stunned by her beauty. Serge tried again to open the door. I pulled him back and shouted, "Idiot, where are you going? Have you ever seen a girl walking naked in the freezing forest at night?" I slapped him to snap him out of it. We locked the second door again, covered the window with everything we had, and tried to think. "She's completely naked," Serge whispered. I didn't even realize at first. "What do we do?" "Let's wait for morning and then move. Despite the weather, we'll look for our car, or at least find our lake first." We threw more firewood into the stove, lay in our beds. Sleep wouldn't come. Conversation was impossible. We stared at the ceiling, scared. Almost asleep, a knock came again. Louder this time, non-stop. I admit, it was terrifying. Then we heard a child crying and a female voice saying, "Please let us in. We are freezing with the child. We're hungry." Serge said, "Come to the window. We need to make sure you're alone." But no one approached the window. The woman spoke again, her voice breaking, sounding eerie and unhealthy, as if a sick drunk general was trying to imitate her. She repeated, "Let us in, let us in, let us in." And soon she screamed, while the child kept crying. In our horror, someone outside began shaking the door. We were terrified that whoever it was might break it down. Only God knows what would happen next. Serge panicked completely, sat in front of the door, and prayed aloud without stopping. The door was being battered for about half an hour. He prayed the same time. Despite the tension, I noticed Serge had never been particularly religious, yet he knew many prayers. Later, he told me his grandmother was very devout, and she made him recite prayers as a child. Unfortunately, everything stopped. I don't know why. Maybe it was Serge's prayers, maybe his determination, or maybe the entity realized it was useless to try to break the door. Later, Serge and I shared some homemade liquor, and I wondered aloud why it hadn't tried to break the window. You could smash glass even with a fist or stick. Serge replied, "I thought you noticed too. The window was outlined all around with chalk, many times. Maybe that helped us then." That night, in fear and confusion, we sat for a long time, but eventually sleep overcame us. During the night, nothing strange happened again. In the morning, when we woke up, we were stunned. All the snow had melted, as if it had never existed, and the weather was warm and sunny. I must admit, at that moment I thought I had gone crazy. If I had been alone, without a witness, I would have gone home and checked myself into a mental hospital. We left the cabin, trusted our instincts, and went searching for the car. About 15 minutes later, we reached the lake where we had been fishing. We were in shock. There were no words to describe the scene around us. Eventually, we reached the car without incident, but when we got home, we found all the fish we had caught had gone bad, as if they had been left in the sun for 2 days. All the other leftover food was spoiled as well. After that incident, Serge and I visited our lake many times. We explored the area, tried to find that cabin or the clearing with the 3 nameless crosses. All in vain. No matter where we went, there was no sign of the cabin or the crosses. Once, we met some other fishermen at the lake and asked if they knew anything about a cabin or 3 graves. They looked at us like we were crazy and said nothing like that had ever existed there. And one more thing that haunts me to this day. When we returned, I immediately contacted my relatives and told them everything. They didn't believe me. They said that on that day, evening and night, there wasn't a single snowflake and the weather had been above freezing. There is a special kind of silence that exists only in morgues. It is not the silence of a library, filled with the soft whisper of turning pages. And it is not the silence of an empty house, where floorboards creak at night. This silence is absolute, artificial, unnatural. A ringing emptiness where time itself seemed frozen. A thick, cold stillness, broken only by the steady hum of refrigeration units. I chose this silence as my profession. My name is Ethan. I am an intern in the pathology department. Death was never a tragedy to me. It was a fact, a logical ending that every complex system eventually reaches. The human body is an astonishing machine, And here, in this cold kingdom of tile and steel, I studied the reasons why those machines fail. My work demanded detachment, a clear mind, a steady hand, and I took pride in possessing all three. I left my emotions outside the heavy, iron-reinforced door. A permanent part of that silence was Mr. Petrov, the night orderly, an old man who seemed to be made from the same substance as the morgue itself, dust, formaldehyde, and quiet. He was impossibly old. He moved without sound, like a shadow, and he almost never spoke. He was not a person. He was a function, transport, clean, cover. He was as essential to the morgue as the autopsy table or the steel drawers in the wall. I never saw him eat. I never saw him drink coffee. He simply existed, blending into the hum of the freezers and the smell of disinfectant. It all began with numbers. I am a meticulous person. One of my duties was maintaining the intake log, time of arrival, presumed cause of death, and of course, the body's weight. And that's when I noticed an anomaly, barely noticeable, within the margin of error. In the mornings, when I came on shift and prepared the bodies for autopsy, I performed a second weighing, and the bodies that had spent the night in the morgue were almost always lighter. Not by much, 50 grams, 100, sometimes 200. I explained it away. Dehydration, faulty old scales, moisture evaporation. Any rational person could find a dozen explanations. But the anomaly was disturbingly consistent. It occurred in every body that spent the night under Mr. Petrov's silent watch. Then I noticed something else. Physical changes. Microscopic, almost imperceptible. I remembered a large, ugly mole on the cheek of a drowning victim. In the morning, before the autopsy, the mole was still there, but it looked flatter, faded. I blamed the cold and post-mortem changes. Another body, an elderly man with cirrhosis, had a bright tattoo on his arm. By morning, the lines seemed blurred, less defined. I told no one. Try telling someone that bodies lose weight overnight and tattoos fade. They would have sent me for a psychiatric evaluation. I convinced myself it was stress, an overactive imagination fed by the nature of my work. But I began to watch Mr. Petrov. He did everything as he always had. Mopped the floors, wiped the tables, moved bodies on a gurney. His face, round and wrinkled like a baked potato, showed no expression. His eyes, deep set, almost colorless, looked nowhere. But there was something strange in his movements. When he touched the dead, he did it with an unusual, almost tender care. Not like objects, but like a gourmet inspecting produce at a market. One night, I had to stay late. A complicated case. Histology samples needed immediately. I worked in my small lab adjacent to the main hall. Mr. Petrov was on duty. He glided silently across the tiled floor. That was when I decided to perform a small, cruel experiment. I entered the main hall. On a gurney, under a sheet, lay a young woman, a car accident victim. I approached her. "Mr. Petrov, could you help me for a moment? I need to turn her over," I said, keeping my voice steady. He drifted toward me. We turned the body, and while his attention was elsewhere, pretending to examine injuries, I discreetly used the tip of a sterile forceps to leave a tiny scratch on her forearm, less than a millimeter. Impossible to notice unless you knew where to look. "Thank you, Mr. Petrov. I'll take it from here." He nodded silently and drifted away. I pretended to finish my work, said goodbye, and left. But I didn't go home. I circled the building and climbed through the window of an abandoned locker room that overlooked the main hall. It was dark. It smelled of mothballs. Through the dusty glass, like looking through murky water, I could see the hall lit by a single dim lamp. I hid and waited. An hour. 2. Nothing happened. Mr. Petrov sat in his chair motionless, like a statue. I began to think my paranoia had finally won. Then he stood up. He moved silently as always, walked to the gurney, pulled back the sheet. But he didn't look at her face or her injuries. He stared at her arm, at the exact spot where I had made the scratch. For several seconds, he simply examined it, his head tilted, and then, what happened next is something my mind still refuses to accept. It wasn't like in horror movies. He didn't bite the flesh. He leaned over her arm, and from his mouth, slowly, like something from the deep ocean, emerged. Something thin, pale, almost translucent, like a tongue or a tentacle. It gently lowered itself onto the woman's skin. There was no blood, no sound. The tendril touched the scratch and went still. I thought I could see it vibrating, as if drawing out something invisible. It worked with a surgeon's precision. After a minute, it detached and slowly withdrew back into Mr. Petrov's mouth. He covered the body with the sheet. Trembling, I pressed myself against the glass. He had done something to the scratch, consumed it, erased it. Mr. Petrov slowly turned around and looked directly at me, directly at the dark window where I was hiding. 20 meters apart, dim light, dusty glass. But I saw his eyes. They were no longer empty. There was depth in them, ancient, inhuman intelligence, and calm, cold understanding. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply looked, and his gaze said everything. I know you're here. I know what you saw. And now you know what I am. I don't remember how I got out of there. The next day passed in a haze. I ignored my phone. I wanted to run, quit, forget everything. But by evening, I understood one simple truth. I couldn't. What if I leave? Another intern will come, less observant, and without my watchful eye, Mr. Petrov will stop being careful. His appetite will grow. Who will stop him? The police? Hello, officer. Our night orderly eats the dead with a tongue-like appendage. They would lock me up for the rest of my life. I realized I was the only one who knew, and the only one who could influence it at all. The next day, I came to work. Pale, dark circles under my eyes. But I came. Mr. Petrov was there, gliding silently through the halls. He gave no sign that anything had happened. Neither did I. We didn't say a word, but everything had changed. A quiet Cold War had begun between us. I couldn't stop him, but I could watch. Every morning now, I did more than weigh the bodies. I examined them closely. I photographed identifying marks. I kept notes in my private journal. And he knew. He felt my eyes on him every time he approached a new arrival. This is my ending. It isn't like the others. There is no victory, no defeat, no battle, no escape. Only an endless, cold truce within the walls of the morgue. I am not a hero. I am a watchman, a night sentinel. My task is not to defeat the monster, but to restrain it with constant, unblinking observation, to keep it cautious, to keep it from losing control. I sacrifice my peace, my future, my sanity for this strange, terrifying duty. I am the only audience in his theatre, and as long as I am watching, he must continue playing the role of a harmless old orderly. And every night, as I walk into work, I ask myself the same question. How long will my presence be enough to hold back his hunger? Making a dream come true is always exciting. But what should you choose, so you won't regret it later? Ethan had been tormented by this decision for almost 2 weeks. For his 17th birthday, he had been given money and the freedom to decide how to spend it. There was just enough for a tattoo. That was what he wanted more than anything. He had dreamed about it for years, but when the opportunity finally became real and he began searching for the perfect design, he completely lost himself among hundreds of options, unable to choose. Ethan asked his friends for help. From time to time, they sent him different images. One of those messages arrived late at night. Half asleep, almost on autopilot, Ethan opened it and instantly woke up. This was it. A tattoo sketch, highly detailed in 2 colors, black and red. It depicted a demon, or maybe a devil, surrounded by occult symbols. It looked almost alive, and that dark energy. Ethan loved everything mystical and magical. He had watched every movie on the subject, played countless games, even taken part in occult rituals, considering himself almost a mage. And this was exactly the kind of tattoo he wanted, something that reflected his inner world. This is it. Yes, perfect. If only the artist can recreate it exactly like this. There were no doubts. This was exactly what he had been looking for. That sarcastic gaze. So terrifying. Perfect. Barely waiting for morning, Ethan sent the sketch to the tattoo artist. The reply came quickly. The artist agreed. Ethan was ecstatic. The only thing left was to thank the friend who had sent such an incredible idea. Ethan opened his messenger app, but the message was gone. Strange. He checked every chat. The image was nowhere to be found. He felt a little disappointed, not understanding which of his friends had sent him that sketch. At least he had the sense to save the image immediately. After agreeing on the time and details, Ethan went to make his dream come true. The first session was finished. The tattoo started at his neck, extended over his left shoulder, and ran down the left side of his chest. Ethan happily pulled off his shirt to show it to his friends. "Ethan, that's insane. Wow, how much did it cost? Give me the artist's contact." He soaked in their admiration. The only thing that bothered him was the soreness of the skin and a strange sensation of cold. But the artist had warned him. Healing could be painful, with irritation. So Ethan took painkillers and ignored the feeling. "Hey, Ethan, what do these symbols mean? They look like runes." "It's just a picture," Ethan laughed. "I don't think they mean anything." They spent the entire day walking around the city. It was warm and sunny, but Ethan wrapped himself in a hoodie. He was shivering, and it felt like the cold was coming directly from his left shoulder, as if someone's icy hand was gripping him, cooling his entire body. He felt worse, dizzy. Dark spots floated before his eyes. Barely making it home, Ethan collapsed onto the couch. His parents weren't home. He showed the tattoo to his sister, then went to his room. In the silence, he finally listened to his body. His left shoulder was almost numb. His left arm was noticeably colder than his right. Ethan panicked. This wasn't something he had been warned about. He searched the internet for possible side effects. Nothing matched. Meanwhile, the cold spread through his body. Finally, he rushed into the bathroom and stepped under a hot shower. Trying to warm up, he looked at the tattoo in the mirror. Wait, no, just imagination. The demon's expression, had it changed? Ethan turned the hot water up. What? The face on his chest seemed to wink. No, just water. He turned off the shower, wiped the droplets away, and looked again. The demon in the mirror was staring straight at him. That was impossible. Its gaze should have been turned away. Ethan stumbled back, pressing himself against the wall. Goosebumps crawled across his skin. "No, I need to figure this out," he whispered, stepping toward the mirror again. This time, the demon's mouth was clearly wider, the eyes narrowed, and suddenly, it laughed. A horrifying, animalistic grin. Ethan screamed. He slipped on the wet floor and fell. The last thing he felt was his head striking something hard, cold, wet, slippery. Ethan came to in fragments, fights, running, jumping over fences, far too high to be human. In those brief moments of awareness, he desperately tried to regain control of his body, but he couldn't. Violent will was controlling him like a puppet. The left side of his body was completely numb, ice cold, and that laughter, demonic, not his. He woke up in a hospital room, white walls, unfamiliar smells, strangers leaning over him. He couldn't move. His arms and legs were cuffed to the bed. Then he saw a familiar face. His father, exhausted, older, broken. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "the tattoo, it has to be removed." That was all he managed to say. Recovery took years. The tattoo was removed, but his mind was damaged forever. Only later did he learn the truth. That night, he burst naked out of the bathroom, kissed his terrified sister, and jumped out of a fourth-floor window. He ran through the city, attacking people, smashing storefronts, laughing without stopping. No one could stop him. Not civilians, not security, not even police. Only powerful tranquilizers brought him down. A shaman later said, "People carve symbols into themselves without understanding their meaning. If your son knew whose face that was, he would have cut it off with a knife. What he let inside himself is worse than pain. He will never be the same." Years passed. Ethan survived. But one thing stayed with him forever. A crippling fear of mirrors. Because every time he looks into one, he doesn't see his own reflection. He sees the demon grinning back at him. My father was not dying the way other people die. His illness did not consume him from within, nor did it turn him into a shadow. It was building him, reshaping him. Every day, I watched his body become a prison for itself. In our village, hidden among chalk hills and constant fog, we called it the bone sickness. The city doctors we once summoned could only shrug, muttering about rare fibrodysplasia and genetic anomalies. But we knew better. This was not a disease. It was architecture. It always began with a deep, aching pain in the bones, as if an invisible giant were twisting them. Then hard nodules appeared beneath the skin, solid as stone. And then, one day, the first bone spike would pierce through the flesh, sharp, perfectly white, like a polished fang, the first brick in a growing cage. I cared for my father during the last 2 years of his transformation. I watched his ribs grow outward, bending and fusing together, forming an intricate yet unbreakable lattice around his chest. I saw the vertebrae in his neck extend, slowly weaving themselves into something resembling a tall Gothic collar. His own bones, his support, became his prison. He lay in bed, nearly motionless, wrapped in that white growing web, staring silently at the ceiling. He did not suffer. That was the true horror. When bone broke through skin, there was blood, but the pain faded quickly. The sickness did not wish to torment. It wished to build. It had a purpose, cold and incomprehensible, like the intent of a spider weaving its web. In the final month, the cage was nearly complete. Bone growths on his skull formed an ornate sculpted helmet. His fingers lengthened and fused, turning his hands into delicate, useless fans of bone. He stopped speaking. He only watched, and I sat beside him, changing bandages where the bone still grew, listening to the faint, barely audible creak of a skeleton rebuilding itself. On the last evening, he looked at me for the first time in weeks. There was no fear in his eyes, no pain, only a deep, cosmic curiosity. He smiled faintly, and I saw the final bone extension from his sternum slowly connect to the rib structure with a soft click. The structure was complete. His breathing stopped. He died, but his body did not become a corpse. It did not cool or decay. It became a work of art, a perfect, snow-white sculpture of impossible complexity, built from his own bones, with his shrunken, peaceful body resting inside like a jewel in a case. In our village, such sculptures were not buried. They were carried with reverence to a chalk cave at the edge of the hills. There, in the half-light, stood dozens of them, a silent history of our sickness, our ancestors, our gallery. I was left alone. The silence in the house became unbearable. Then, a week later, it broke. I woke in the night to a familiar, deep pain in my thigh, a pain that twisted the joints. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding like ice against stone. I ran my hand along my leg, beneath the skin, on the bone. I felt a small, stone-hard nodule. The architecture had begun in me. I was not afraid. Not at first. I had watched it too long to panic. There was only a dull, fatal acceptance. This was the fate of my bloodline. But now that it was happening to me, I wanted answers. Why? And for what purpose? The first spike pierced my left shoulder a month later. The pain was sharp, but brief. I studied the white glossy fang emerging from my body with a scientist's detached curiosity. I began keeping a journal, measuring the growth, documenting every sensation. I became my own experiment. The world narrowed. First, I could no longer wear normal clothes. Then, I struggled to fit through doorways. My ribs followed my father's path, reaching outward, seeking to enclose me. I spent hours sitting by the window. I watched the bone extensions in my hands slowly weave themselves into lace. It was beautiful, a terrifying, inhuman, mathematically precise beauty. Then something changed. I was no longer bound to one place, to one body. I could pass through walls, rise toward the clouds, hear the quiet music of the Earth's rotation, and see the warmth radiating from living beings. I went to the cave, to our ancestral gallery. I saw them all, my father, my ancestors. Their consciousnesses were there, drifting in silence like a constellation of souls. They were not dead, they were free, and they were waiting for me. I am no longer Matthew. I am part of something greater, quiet, eternal, observing. I am the melody played by a bone harp. And this is not the end. This is the true beginning.